it's wonderful to us be able to celebrate together. And I'm really going to, I guess, pick up a little bit about what we've just done and find a story in the Bible, an encounter with Jesus, where something quite similar happened. But I want you to kind of get into your mind. Give me a little wave if you have seen the animated film, or even the more recent, The Lion King. Anyone? Nice. Thanks very much. For those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, speak to all the younger people later. Or my generation, because it was out when I was a kid. So it starts, I watched it back this week, and it starts with this moment of presenting and welcoming a new addition to the family. So I want you to picture this in your mind. There's animals walking, the circle of life is singing in the background. The parents, the lion parents, are all looking super proud, a little bit like Amber and Joe did earlier, like, oh, look at my babies. And everyone's coming, and then the faith leader, Rafiki, he gets this moment and he holds aloft young baby Simba. I'm slightly worried from a health and safety perspective because that was a high ledge, but I wasn't going to do it with these babies today. Over the ledge, anybody think they can do the sound that they make? Yeah, no, we're not going to do that. Okay, and we hold, I was slightly, okay, here we go. Nansingonya bagiti baba. I've been practicing that all week. I apologize to everyone who I've just upset in my terrible attempt at speaking the language. But there's this moment, isn't it? Everyone cheers. I mean, they cheered way more than you just did. I'm putting that out there. They cheer, they get excited. There is a new addition to the family. We want to make sure that Simba knows he is welcomed. We want to make sure that Simba knows that we are here for him. We want to take this moment to celebrate the gift that is life. And in the account, the story that we're going to look at in the Bible, imagine parents with that same idea. We want to come to a respected and a renowned religious faith leader, a rabbi. We want to come in community and say we are here for these kids. And we want this respected, this well-known, this increasingly famous rabbi to take the children and to pray a blessing over them, because we want the best for our kids. And so this story kind of unfolds for us in the Bible, but it doesn't quite go according to plan. So we're going to be looking at Luke chapter 18, and we're going to be just looking at a few verses. If you've got a Bible or a device, you can Google it if you want, but I will also put it up on the screen. And I'm going to read these words because people have understood, hey, there's something about this guy, there's something about his compassion, his power, and his grace and his love, and I want to get them to Jesus. And this is how it unfolds. People, read parents, people were bringing babies to Jesus so that he would bless them. I think he might have done a slightly better job than I did today, but it's all good. They've been dedicated. So these people are bringing babies to Jesus so he could bless them. When the disciples saw this, they scolded them. Then Jesus called them to him and said, "Allow the children to come to me. Don't forbid them, because God's kingdom belongs to people like these children. I assure you," it's almost like he's going, let me make my point again. "I assure you that whoever doesn't welcome God's kingdom like a child will never enter it." So there's this little story here, but you are going to help me and be a little bit participatory today. So if we can go to the next slide, please. I'm going to put it back up on, and you're going to have a couple of questions. We're not going to give you very long. What are the parents doing? How do the disciples respond? And what do you notice about Jesus? So it's up there for you on the screen and for you at home to put in the chat. So just have literally a 60-second conversation. You're having a little look at what's happened in this story. What are the parents doing? How are the disciples responding? And what do you notice about Jesus? Go on, you've got about 2 minutes to have a little discussion, because you'll probably come up with some great things. And then we'll move on to unpack it a bit together. So what is going on here? I mean, it seems on the surface of it seems like quite a simple and clear thing that's happening. But we're going to take a few minutes just to unpack what's happening between Jesus, some families, and his disciples, also known as his friends, his followers, Team Jesus. they're on like a jam-packed kingdom tour. And everybody wants to kind of have a little bit of attention from Jesus. There are lots of people that want his attention. There's crowds following them places. There's religious leaders who are kind of questioning and challenging him. And then there's his team around him who I guess are trying to look out for him. But the author of the Gospel of Luke, he includes this in chapter 18. We do not have time to unpack that today. Everyone's like, thank you very much. He's going to be quick. But I would encourage you to go read it because it is kind of tucked away between two other stories that help to make sense of what's going on here. The story that comes before is about a tax collector. In that day and age, in that society, an outcast, an outsider. And his story is about him connecting with God in humility. And then the story that follows on is about a rich young ruler who is more interested in what he has than discovering more about Jesus. And right in the middle is this tiny little story. And I've been asking the question, God, why did Luke include it here? What is he wanting us to understand or to get to kind of apply to our lives? And I think to the first hearers of these words, they would have been really shocked by this story. They would have been like, what is Jesus doing? Yeah, the disciples are right. Yeah, get the kids out of the way. And so we're going to unpack what Jesus was doing. Because I think it shows us so much of who Jesus is, of what his kingdom is like, and of what it looks like to follow him, to be welcomed by him. He is like no other leader or influencer that they have ever experienced before. And so what is going on in this little story? I think Jesus is trying to help us to understand that he welcomes us to know him, and then he wants us to be welcoming to others. There'll be loads more to unpack in it, but for our time today, I would encourage you to go and read about it. So what are the parents doing? They're doing what Joe and Amber did today. They're bringing their babies, their infants. The idea of the original language is that these were very young kind of babies and infants to Jesus to bless. It was a common thing that would have happened in that day. On special occasions, you would bring your child to a faith leader and ask them to pray a prayer of blessing upon your children. And so this moment, the parents, and the idea is that this happens, the original idea of it is like, this is not a one-off incident, but like wherever Jesus went, people would be like, get my baby to Jesus. Like they would be trying to kind of make their way through the crowds and be like, notice my baby, Jesus. And all that kind of idea that this was happening. And the disciples are like security on there at a gig. No. You haven't got an access area pass, you can't come in. And so there's something in these parents. I wonder what it was about Jesus. I wonder if they were curious about him. I wonder if they'd heard, hey, this is a different kind of person. This is a different kind of leader. This is a person who seems to be showing us a new way of knowing God, a new way of encountering God. And maybe my child will be welcomed by Jesus. And so that's what the parents are doing. And then how are the disciples responding? I think we've got to have a bit of grace for the disciples because I think they misunderstood the moment and I think they misunderstood Jesus in this minute. They are like gig security. If you've been to Coldplay or you went to see Pink at the Villa, right? After a concert, after a moment, there's autograph hunters. Everybody wants a piece of the famous person. Everybody wants to get near for a bit of a glimpse and some connection. And essentially the disciples are like, why are you bothering Jesus? He's like so important. Don't you know how influential and important and how great and wonderful he is? We've been singing about Jesus in all of those terms today. And they're like, look, just, this is not the time. This is not the moment. Take your kids away. He doesn't have time for this. And he doesn't have time for you. And Jesus says, team, you've got this one wrong. Team, I want to show you a better way. I read this and I feel a little bit kind of like I identify with those disciples. I don't always get it right. Followers of Jesus, we don't always get it right. We're not suddenly perfect when we say yes to following Jesus. And Jesus wants to course correct them. He wants to help them and show them a better way. The last few weeks, we've been thinking about there's not a thing to do, but a way to be. So there's something here that Jesus is showing. He's like, there's a way to be when you follow me, and I want you to understand it. And so there's these multiple layers of things that are going on. And he's using this moment to teach them about the kingdom. So, what is the kingdom? Well, it's Jesus' shorthand for the community that he is building. Of those who would say yes to following Jesus, Jesus would be the king in charge of their lives, and then they would demonstrate what's important to Jesus in the way that they live in the places and spaces to the people that they get to go and live around. And he is a king like no other. In this environment, if you were to take it to a king of the day, you wouldn't even get past the threshold. You wouldn't even get into the palace. Like, you would be stopped at the door. Children have no legal status or right. And even though they are seen as a gift, they're not really allowed to be in those environments. They're not really welcome in those environments. And Jesus is like, hang on, team. Yes, they are. You might look at them and think they're insignificant and there's nothing special about them. But no, I want to show you what it is like to follow me. I want to show you what it's like to be part of my community, my kingdom, where the littlest and the least and the lost are welcome. So what does Jesus say and do? He calls them to him. I just use your imagination to see the crowd around, see the parents kind of trying to get through to get to Jesus, and see the kind of disciples, you know, your security, your gig security, standing around and going, oh, you're not allowed in. And then Jesus is like, whoa, 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 whoa. And he calls them to him. He's like, no, come on. Don't stop them. Don't hinder them. Don't get in the way of them coming to me. Let them come to me. They are welcome here. And I imagine the kids giggling, squirming, squealing, a little bit like we saw this morning. And Jesus sort of like trying to wrestle them and pray over them and, you know, blessing on them and interact with the families. He's like, look, they're welcome here. And there's a couple of different layers I want us to think about, and then we'll pray. I think one of the layers is the one that I've been talking about, to his team, to those who are following Jesus. He's like, if you don't welcome children, or welcome people like you welcome children, then you've got it wrong. You know, Jesus had previously said to his team, look, how you welcome children, the act of welcoming children in my name is a way of welcoming me and of welcoming your Father in heaven. But it's like they've forgotten this moment, and the kids are here and they've forgotten what Jesus taught them, and they're doing the exact opposite of what Jesus has asked of them. He's like, look, God's kingdom belongs to people like these children. He shows them a better way. Jesus, in his time-limited 3.5 years of touring and teaching, made time and space for the littlest. I wish you could see how cute Ruby looks on the front row now. For those for whom other people might ignore or overlook or might believe that they were insignificant, he shows care for them. He welcomes them. He wants his team to do the same. He's showing them a way to be. He's like, guys, get the welcome mat out. Anyone got a welcome mat outside their house? Mine looks a little bit like the TARDIS. So when you're coming into my home, you know what you're going to be welcomed into, the world of a geek. But he's saying, look, guys, the welcome mat is out. We can't roll it up. The welcome mat is out. You don't welcome people to your home and then ignore them or treat them badly or tell them off when they come in the house. Well, if you do, they probably won't come back again. You know, he's like, the welcome mat is out. He's wanting them to understand what he's doing in this moment. It's not just about the children. He's trying to teach them and show them, hey, this is what it looks like to follow after me. And then he teaches and he speaks, and there's another layer. He says, look, we, every single one of us, are invited to get to know him. It says, whoever doesn't welcome God's kingdom like a child will never enter it. In other words, we don't have to have it all together. We don't have to have it all figured out before we come to Jesus. We don't have to work for it. Children, infants, are a picture of grace and humility. They can't do anything for themselves, can they? They're a picture of complete dependency. They can't earn their way to Jesus. They can't prove they're good enough for God to take notice. They can't do anything for Jesus, yet they are welcomed. And Jesus is saying, look, I am making a way for everyone to be welcomed. And ultimately, he will make a way for everyone to know him, for everyone to receive that invitation to be welcomed by his forgiveness and his friendship. He will soon die on a cross and rise from the dead. And so there's this layer that Jesus is saying, look, you are welcome. You don't have to have it all together. You don't have to have it all figured out. You don't have to understand everything before you are welcome to come and know me. I'm making space. I'm making a way for that to happen. You see, the society that they lived in, There was lots of rules, lots of regulations, lots of ways before you could get anywhere near a sense of connecting with God. And Jesus is going, I want to show you a way to be, and it's a different way. You have access to me. Babies have access to their parents. They're reliant upon them. And Jesus is like, I want you to understand this picture. That's what it looks like to come to me. Whether you feel like you've got nothing to offer or you've got loads to offer, it doesn't matter. You are welcomed. And then the final layer, I think, is that he gives us the choice of how we welcome him. And he uses children to help us understand how we can do that. I just want us to think very quickly about 3 words. Curious. I want us to think about what it means to be curious. I want us to think about what it means to be humble and trusting. I loved earlier when we were dedicating, Henry just turned straight to the screen and he's like, it's us on the screen. He was so curious about what was going on behind him and not at all interested in what we were trying to do, because he was curious. And I think when we think about coming to Jesus, maybe we're thinking we've got to have all the answers, we've got to understand it, we've got to know it. But I think actually we can learn from kids, and Jesus is going to be like a child. Don't be childish, but be like a child. Have a curiosity that says, I want to find out more. I want to discover for myself. I want to see who you really are, Jesus. We were talking as a team, and many of you know Karen and David and their daughter Isabel. And she was sharing with us that they were doing bedtime prayers. Anyone else do that with their kids? Give us a wave. Beautiful. I know. Come on, stay with me, guys. I know it's warm. And they were talking to, praying to the Father in heaven. And Isabel was like, huh? How can he be my Father in heaven? Because he's also in my heart. How can he be in both places at once? And Karen is like, this is a deep theological question. How do I answer is she 4, 5? 5, Ellie? Like, how do I answer my 5-year-old? And then she just went, he just must be very squishy. And I love that. I love that. She's curious. She doesn't have to know all the answers. She's open to finding out for herself. And whether you don't know Jesus at all or you've been following him for 7 decades, I'm not looking at anyone in particular, be curious. I don't think we will ever exhaust the wonder of who God is. I don't think we'll ever find out everything there is to know about God. In fact, if we could find out everything there is to know about God, he'd be pretty small, right? I could put him in a box. I could carry him around in my handbag. I'm not sure he's the one I would want to be orienting my life around and following through thick and thin. So there's this moment then. The average 4-year-old asks 250 questions. Anyone have or have had a 4-year-old? Is this right, parents, grandparents, aunts and uncles? About 250 questions a day? Okay. Adults ask 12. Adults ask 12. And that's usually, where have I left my keys? Where have I left my phone? What time did you say we'd pick them up? And I wonder if when Luke is putting this where he's putting it in chapter 18 between these 2 different stories, if he's going, look, I want you to understand, you don't have to have it figured out. You don't have to have it all together. You can come as you are. Jesus will welcome you. You are welcome. You are invited to know him, but be curious. If you want to come like a child, ask questions. All through the eyewitness accounts in the Bible, Jesus is either asking people questions or people are asking questions of Jesus. And he's wanting them to understand and explore and to figure things out for themselves. So I want to say, let's not lose our curiosity. But curiosity requires humility, right? Because it requires us to say, I don't know everything. I don't know all the answers. I haven't got it all figured out, and curiosity requires humility. I love the idea is that these are infants. Luke is really clear. He's like, these are not like 9, 10, 11-year-olds. These are babies. These are infants. And he's like, look, there's something about that humility. There's no pretensions with a 2-year-old, right? What you see is what you get, or a 4-year-old. There's no I'm one thing with my mates and I'm something else with my parents and I'm something, what you see is what you get. And it's this idea of coming with humility and saying, I don't have it all together. I don't know all the answers, but I'm open to finding out more and to figuring out what that looks like to follow him. And this childlike approach to Jesus is what he's encouraging. He's like, if you come and think you've got to kind of tick a checklist off or you've got to have it all together, he's like, it's really difficult to get to know me. You can't get to know me that way because you're going to come with all the ideas of what you think. Whereas if you come and you're like, okay, I don't know and I want to find out and I'm open and I'm curious and I'm willing to discover, then you'll be able to find me and to know me. And this curiosity, this humility is in an environment where the one that we're curious about can be trusted. You know, the one that we're curious about is faithful and reliable and ever loving and compassionate and powerful and gracious. And we see that in this moment. Jesus is being the very thing. He's like, no, let them come to me. Let them figure out they are welcomed. It's through Jesus. We can't depend on ourselves to get ourselves to Jesus. We can't get it all right to get ourselves to Jesus. It's like, no, it's okay. I'm making a way. I'm making space for you to know. It's dependent on who I am, not what you can or can't do. That's what grace is. It's through Jesus, and we get to be welcomed to know his friendship and his forgiveness. And in a healthy family environment, children learn to trust their parents, to do right by them and for them, to provide a safe place to grow and to learn and develop and explore and understand and enjoy life. And I think Jesus is trying to say, hey, look, that's what it looks like when you follow me. We're going to be in this together. We're going to learn this together. I'm going to show you. I'm going to lead you. I'm going to guide you. You don't have to have it all together. But it is maybe time to get on your bike. Last week we thought about getting on your bike in a particular way, and I want to pick up that idea. Anyone here ride a bicycle? I want to ride my bicycle. Right, okay. We know some of them ride like very far. You know when they say you don't forget how to ride a bike? They lie. You do. It's possible. I got on a bike a couple of years ago after having not ridden for a long time, and it wasn't a pretty sight. But on socials, there's a kind of video going around at the moment. I don't know if you've seen it on various platforms, but it's of a dad trying to teach his kid to ride a bike. And the kid is like really scared. It's the day where the stabilizers are coming off, and he's a little bit nervous, he's a little bit concerned, he's a little bit worried. And dad is sort of just covering the bases. Dad is right there, and the kid is like got one eye on the road and the bike in front of him and what his feet are doing, and his other eye on his dad to make sure his dad doesn't leave him. And watching this video as the kid's kind of like careering and figuring out how to pedal and steer, he kind of steers off into like down a hill at one point, and the dad sort of scoops him around and brings him back. And I love this picture of trust, right? I wonder if this is something that Jesus was trying to get at, and Luke is trying to help us understand. Like, Jesus is with us. He's going to help us figure these things out. We can trust him to teach us and lead us through the joy and the pain, cheering us on, helping us, leading us. We can come to God because he can be trusted. Not dependent on what we can do for him, but on what he's done and is doing for us. So let's take a moment to reflect, and then I'm going to pray. On your seat, you will have found a Post-it note in the shape of a speech bubble, hopefully. If you haven't, our wonderful team are around. If you wave at them, they will make sure that you get one of those. I wonder if you'll just take a hold of that. I've got a nice bright pink one here. Thanks very much. And one of the things that we love to do here is to just help us think about and apply what we're learning together as we gather on a Sunday and in other places and spaces. And to kind of give us those pointers to remind us to carry on the conversation with Jesus through the week, not just in these moments. So there's 3 layers going on here. You will have 1 or 2 Post-it notes. As long as you've got one, that's all you're going to need. Let's think about the layers. Let's reflect about those layers. And really under that banner of how am I welcoming Jesus and others? Layer number 1, in the kingdom teaching moment, Luke is helping us understand that Jesus welcomes us. He makes space for us. He invites us to know him. He makes a way for us, ultimately making a way for all of us to know him, to welcome him, to find out forgiveness and friendship through his death and resurrection. He lays out the welcome mat and he says, come on in. The second layer is Jesus asking us to consider how we welcome him. Will we welcome God like a child when we've got nothing to offer? Will we come with curiosity and humility and be willing to trust? Whether we think we've got loads to offer, too much baggage, or nothing at all. It's based on who he is and what he's done. But welcoming is an active thing. Don't invite someone over for food and then ignore them. And then the third layer is, once we've said yes to following him, will we be welcoming to others around us as a reflection of his welcome to us? So if you're willing and able to stand, let's stand together. The team are going to come back. I wonder if you'll hold your post-it note in your hand just for a few moments while I pray. And I simply want to issue the invitation to be curious about welcoming Jesus. Whether that's for the first time, whether that's for the 20th time, whether that's part of your ongoing life of faith and following, to be curious, to ask questions. It may be that for some of you, you need to write a specific question on your post-it note today. Maybe you've got a specific question for Jesus or about God, and you're like, do you know what? I'm going to write that down. I'm going to stick that in my notebook, my bag, my purse, on my fridge, somewhere. And I'm just going to ask that question and be curious, be open. Maybe Jesus will speak back to me. Maybe I'll find out something more about who he is. Or maybe you need to write that question: how am I welcoming Jesus and others? And as you see that post-it note this week, it will just remind you, am I coming like a child? And am I welcoming others that perhaps I look at and maybe I don't think they're that significant? Let's be honest. Or maybe I look at them and think, oh, I'm not sure. And Jesus is going, no, I want you to be a reflection of my welcome. So let's pray together. If you need to write anything on that post-it note, you've got a few moments to do that. If you need to write that particular question that's on the screen, then feel free to do that. If you need a pen, we've got a creative area over here in the building. I wonder what you'll do with the welcome mat that Jesus has put out today. And maybe you're here and you're like, do you know what? I want to say a big yes to that. Maybe you want to say a little yes, you're not quite sure, or a healthy maybe. Oh, I'm willing to be a little bit curious, but not too much. Well, then let me pray for us and with us. And if you've got any questions, if you want to find out more, then you can come and speak to one of us or go over to our Connect Corner at the end. We'd love to chat more with you about that. But let me pray. God, thank you that there is so much more of you to discover. Thank you, Jesus, that you are the one who welcomes the least, the lost, the littlest. You are welcoming everyone. Everyone is welcome to know you. Everyone is welcome to know your friendship. Everyone is welcome to know forgiveness. Everyone is welcome into that community, into that kingdom picture of what it looks like to know you. Jesus, thank you that you love us with an unconditional and everlasting love. Lord, I pray that you would help us to be curious and stay curious. To be willing to humbly come and ask questions and be open to what you might want to say and speak and show us this week. And Spirit of God, would you lead us to be a welcoming presence in the life of others, not to shoo people away, not to say, oh, I'm too busy and, oh, you're not important enough, but to show the welcome of Jesus in the way that we welcome others. We ask this, Jesus, in your name. Amen.